Hello class, this is Mr. Parsons here. Just want to take a few minutes to talk to you about constructing scatter plots. I know in the previous lesson we talked about scatter plots and association. Let's look at this particular example. Jared's basketball team stood at various distances from the basketball hoop and counted the number of baskets they was able to make in 30 seconds. Use the data in the table to make a scatter plot. They answer the questions that follow. So look at your x-axis, distance from your hoop. So the distance from your hoop, that's going to be your x. The baskets made, that's your y-axis. This is the baskets made, so this is x, this is y. Think about it as an ordered pair. So we got like 15 and 2, 45 and 2. So your scatter plot look like this: 15 and 2, 45, 2. 30 and 5, and so forth. So you just plotting each one as you would an ordered pair, and now you have your scatter plot. Now that we have our scatter plot based off the data here, we can use this graph to answer questions. All right, and so let's look at the first question. Describe the type of association seen in the scatter plot. Notice that the cluster of data was actually going down. So it looks like as x increase, y decrease. So that was going to be a negative association. All right. Are there any points that don't fit? Yes. If you notice back into the previous graph here, and then I can go back and show you. Look at this, 15 and 2. All right. And then notice this. I'm going to allude to this as well, but look at this cluster of data on this side, and look at this cluster of data on that side. This is just foreshadowing something. But yes, 15 and 2 looks like it doesn't belong. It looks like it's not with the other points along your graph. Describe any unique observations about the shape of the graph. As we show, it looks like there was a gap between two groups of points. All right, and it says use the scatter plot to label each statement as true or false. As the distance from the hoop increases, the number of baskets decreases. That's true. That's true. So what it's telling me is that's a negative association, as one variable increase, one variable decrease, and vice versa. So if we look at it on the other end, as the distance from the hoop decreases, the number of baskets increase. Think about it. The closer you are to a basket, the more baskets you make. That's going to be true. Right. Let's take a look here. So now this example was helping us talking about outliers and clusters. Outliers is basically a point that is significantly higher or significantly lower than your data points. Basically, you can clearly see that point is different from the others. It's either going to be significantly lower or significantly higher. It doesn't fit the pattern of your other points of data along your graph. And so that outlier that we saw, that question that was asked for number 2, that represents the outlier, and that outlier was Jared. Cluster is when there are groups of points. Think about points that are together along your graph. That's a cluster. All right. So either you can have one big cluster, or you can have more than one cluster of data. And in this data that we saw, there was 2 clusters. That's why there was a gap. There was a cluster at the top, and then there was a cluster at the bottom. And so it says, why do we think clustering occurred in the scatter plot? So it showed that the players that stood 15 feet or closer to the hoop, while a second group stood 30 feet or further from the hoop. I mean, if you think about basketball, like your larger players, like your forwards or your centers, is closest to the hoop, where your guards is going to be on the perimeter. And so that's what it's talking about there as far as clustering. All right, let's look at this one here. It says a population of 10 cities and the number of elementary schools in the city shown on the table. Think about it. So if we plotted these points, this is the population, which is your x. All right, and this is the number of elementary school, which is your y. Think about your order pair. If we plot each one of these as we would an order pair, then this is how your point will look like. This is how our data point will look. And so based on the graph, we can use this graph to answer questions. So look at A, describe any association. Well, there's an association. As X increase, as the population increases, the number of elementary school increases. That's going to be a positive association. All right. Does the graph appear to have any outliers? Well, I guess you could say that this point right here, 20 and 18, so 20,000 people have 18 elementary schools. That's a little bit higher than the trend of points here along the graph. So that you could say that that's an outlier. Does the graph demonstrate clustering? Is there a gap in your particular data? And there doesn't seem like there's a gap. So no, there's no clustering going on in this particular graph. All right, let's look at this one. The table shows the number of days since several students added money to their lunch accounts and the balance to their lunch account. So notice, look at the table, look at your graph. The graph represents the number of days, and then this represents the account balance, your Y. And so if we plot each point, the days is your X, the balance is your Y. Think of it as an ordered pair. So if you plot each one, then your graph will look something like this. All right. Describe any associations that we can conclude from the graph. It looks like as the number of days increase, the amount of money that you have decreases, which makes sense. So this will be a negative association. All right. Does the graph appear to have any outliers? No. I mean, the points for the most part are within the trend of points that's along the graph. Does the graph demonstrate clustering? If you notice, there is a gap. You have a group of points here, and you have a group of points there, and there is a gap right here. So this does represent clustering, all right, because we have a cluster of people here that is 4 days or less, and then we have another cluster of people here that is 14 to 20 days. All right. So when we're looking at constructing scatter plots, what you want to do is, first of all, you got to plot your points correctly. Make sure you plot in your identify which is going to be your X value, which is going to be your Y value, and actually would plot an ordered pair. You plot an ordered pair, and then you plot all of those points along your graph. Once you plot those points, then you can be able to look at the graph in general and be able to identify the association, whether it's positive or negative. You can be able to identify whether there's an outlier, meaning if there's a point that's not within the trend of the data along the graph, either it's going to be significantly higher or significantly lower. And if there's clustering. Clustering means that there's a gap in your data, meaning you got a group of points on one end of the graph and then a group of points on another end of the graph, and there's a gap in your graph. And so if you're able to do that, then you're on the right track in regards of constructing and being able to analyze scatter plots. So I hope this helps with understanding of constructed scatter plots.